That time on your TL, it's big picture time, folks. You choose the purpose of being able to essentially address the challenges that we're facing in our climate. Why?
The energy conversation has lots of nuances. I hate the word resilience. We can't resilience ourselves out of the climate crisis. Yeah. We can't watch ourselves go extinct. Why?
You're out here fighting for people's rights. Who's fighting for you? That time on your TL, it's big picture time, folks, and we are discussing the climate, one of the big topics around the world, of course, for very good reason. We are facing a climate crisis, especially here in Africa, and the financing around being able to get climate justice and action around being able to mitigate the effects and the impacts of the damage that's been done by the human race to our shared climate is sorely lacking. But the action doesn't just come from above, and nor does the leadership. It also comes from people who are based at the grassroots. And one such person who is here to discuss with us what the issues are, what the situation is on the ground today, Ms. Irene Asuwa, founder of Ecological Justice. Thank you very much for joining us on the big picture today, Irene. I mean, serious topic for us to discuss. And as you can see, we're all themed in something, in terms of the climate, right? I'm guessing you're red because there's fire on the mountain, right? Yeah, and we've got Tracy Bonareri, of course, our fact checker from Piga Firimbi, who's in with us as is every episode. We've got either Tracy or Tom doing the fact checks for us. Tracy, we're looking into the environment this time around.
Yes.
So misinformation around climate justice, climate action, or am I going too far?
Basically, we're going to be talking about floods and famine today.
Floods, famine?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in the wheelhouse.
Yes.
Right? Okay, I want to start with you, Irene, and you're a fairly young person, 27 years of age, right? There's plenty of things that you could be doing as people your age say to secure the bag, right? And yet you choose the purpose of being able to essentially address the challenges that we're facing in our climate. Why?
Because we don't have another planet, and because the climate crisis, the ecological crisis, is threatening the existence of every living species, not just humans. Of course, if it worsens, the humans being on top of the food chain are more vulnerable and more predisposed. So, two critical reasons: because it threatens our existence and because we don't have an alternative planet.
An alternative planet. Of course, just on with a light touch, of course, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos would beg to differ. But, I mean, those are just two of the 0.01% who,
Yeah.
if it came down to it, might be able to leave. But there are critics of the climate justice, climate change campaign who say that from different ages in human history, we have endured different kinds of crises that have either led to the near extinction of the human race or ages that have changed completely the makeup of the of the earth, the ice age being one of those. And they've also been droughts and famines that have led to various very serious ecological crises in those times. What's different about today?
The timing and the rate at which it's happening. Of course, climate change has been there over time. Weather patterns have been changing over time. The difference is people, animals, living species have been able to tell, predict, and take actions to adapt or to do whatever it is they need to do. But now you have a point in history where the ice is melting faster than it was melting 30, 10, 20 years ago. The drought is ravaging faster than it was happening. You are at a point where weather patterns are very erratic. So even with advancements in technology, we still cannot tell how long it's going to rain, when it's going to rain, how much it's going to rain. We can give plus or minus of how long the sun is going to shine, but we are not able to tell with finality and accurately weather patterns over a long period of time. So when that happens is that people are not able to have what they now call early warning signs, and people are not able to accurately predict what's going to happen. But even if they're able to, so many people, especially in the so-called global south, do not have the capacity to do that, to be, I hate the word resilience.
Why? Because
I'm
it's
looking
become...
for a better word. Yeah, because it's become, be resilient will help you to build your resilience. But we keep losing lives and losing biodiversity. And so we can't continue we can't resilience ourselves out of the climate crisis. Yeah. So people are not able to adopt because you haven't harvested water, or you don't have enough food in store. You don't have an alternative place to evacuate people in case of floods and in case of any natural disaster, which I also don't like the term, because we should be we have been in this planet long enough. We should be able to tell. The animals tell if a disaster is going to happen. So why is it different with this animal called the human being?
You know what? One of the things that perhaps is different between us and the rest of nature is, of course, you know, aside from the fact that we consume a lot more than we need, we, and this is part of our character, we continually misdiagnose or mislabel things, or label them in such a way that it becomes very difficult for anybody to really, you know, appreciate the danger that we're in. And my personal gripe with climate justice, climate action, resilience, etc., is these big terms that don't really capture what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
Now, you work with communities at the grassroots. What's their understanding, and how do they interpret these big terms that we talk, climate change, resilience, etc.? How do they describe it? Because I think that's part of the solution. Anyway, this is my opinion. I shouldn't even be giving it. But, you know, how do they interpret this?
People will interpret things through their lived realities.
Through their experiences?
Yes, through their very experiences. So people along River Yala will tell you that the river is shrinking, and suddenly at some point they're not able to get water from it. And people from around the lake or around the oceans will tell you sometimes the ocean rises too much, or sometimes it goes. And people who have been there for a while and through lived experiences have that organic knowledge, somehow are still able to tell when the water will rise and when it will go far away.
Yeah.
But you see, this information does not help them if they don't have that technical and resource capacity to do what they need to do. It's not that they don't know what they need to do.
Yeah.
You can tell people harvest water, but with my own super drum, with my own 5,000 liters tanks, if I'm privileged to have one, is not able to take me through the next dry season. So something like that, for me to be able to adapt, requires a very structural process. Yeah, you need dams, you need to secure water ponds, you need to conserve already existing rivers, which people don't understand, by the way. Part of solving the water crisis is ensuring that we maintain our rivers and we bring them back. We don't do further harm to the rivers, and the ones that are already damaged, we rehabilitate them.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to harvest flowing water than harvesting or pumping still water. You need more electricity, you need more infrastructure, you need a lot. It's more expensive to get water from a still source than from a moving source. So the problems that we are seeing right now require structural solutions.
Okay.
Not telling
Allan,
reduce what you eat.
Why am I'm feeling targeted? I'm feeling it. Why?
No.
It's a bubble jacket. I'm not that heavy.
No. As long as someone is still overproducing and taking from a life support system to produce what you don't need, then it doesn't make sense for us to tell you at an individual capacity to reduce.
And isn't that the challenge with the global climate conversation,
Yeah.
right? So the people who have industrialized through the use of fossil fuels, through highly consumptive and very damaging means to get to where they are, to the point where they can now fairly easily switch to more sustainable sources of power, sources of energy, more sustainable use and conservation of water. All of these guys in the so-called global north, right, are now telling us, you guys can't industrialize this way. And here, again, is the dilemma. I think President William Ruto of Kenya was discussing this with Mo Ibrahim fairly recently at the summit that they had in Nairobi. And Mo Ibrahim gave him a very clear example of what Yoweri Museveni, the president in Uganda, was saying. Why should I stop pumping my oil out of the ground? And until I'm given a solution that actually works for me, I'm going to continue doing this, right? So why should we? We are the ones who are suffering the worst in terms of the worst impacts in terms of climate change, right? And yet we are the ones who don't have the resources to be able to change our fate. Our resources lie in the ground. Our resources sometimes lie in highly consumptive means of being able to extract from the environment. We need that money, do we not? So how then do we get ourselves out of this situation?
That's a very good justification. The energy conversation has lots of nuances. We will not go into that now. That makes sense, but it also doesn't make sense for Museveni or Ruto to say that and go ahead and drill the oil and then it is not used in the continent. And then go ahead and not compensate. I don't like so many words that are used here in the sector, so I'm going to say a lot of things in quotes.
Does it have to be used in a continent as long as we just profit from it?
Because the international architecture is, as long as you're not using it on the continent, you're likely not going to benefit, or you're going to get very little out of it. And you are the one with the resource. You are the one who's going to bear the impact that comes with drilling that resource. You're the one who's going to evict people to put up that resource. So at what expense?
Look at Qatar, look at the Emiratis. I mean, they've built civilizations out of the desert based on almost purely oil wealth. Look at Norway. It has the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. 1% of the world's global stocks, for instance, and world's wealth is, held by the Norway Sovereign Fund, which is as a result of drilling of fossil fuels, etc., and the exploitation of these kinds of resources. So again, I mean, you see, if the market lies out there, does it mean that we have to do that? I get the logic that we don't have the infrastructure as yet to be able to do that, and that will be a much longer process. But if we're exporting oil to places in the world that need it, and we receive a premium for it, money is money, right?
Money is money, but it's not money if the financial system is also not in your favor.
Okay.
So the same way Norway or the people you mentioned will be selling oil is not the same terms Uganda or Kenya will be selling oil. So it's still a shot on the foot, even on that end. So that's where I'm saying that this conversation globally, locally, nationally, regionally needs a lot of structural shifts, which the biggest contributors are not willing. And even those people you mentioned, they've done those things at the expense of people.
They have.
Yeah, and and people, they have not done anything to try and rectify whatever it is they did. And for those deals to be cut, again, that's why I'm saying the energy conversations has lots of things in it that people don't talk about. When they go into those deals, there are concessions they make and they throw countries and people under the bus. So, yeah, people need to invest, but at what expense? And if the investment you're going in, your own people, the taxpayers are not going to get the return on that investment, then it really doesn't make sense. So why suck up ecosystems? Have someone hoard the oil, because it's also not being used. Someone is hoarding it, so you can pay I don't know how many dollars for it. So they go into other territories, like now they are coming into Uganda and Tanzania to get it very cheaply. Then go and hoard it.
Okay, so there is also a bit of a sea change in terms of the global financial infrastructure.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen what's been happening around the BRICS and trying to abandon the US dollar as a reserve currency, create a reserve currency that's based on a basket of currencies, chiefly led by the BRICS. Is this something that, as activists, you guys are looking at and rooting for, because then it rewires the global financial architecture, perhaps in our favor? We don't yet know how far reaching all of this is going to be. But you're observing this, and you're speaking both to a local context and a global context. This should be something, or is this something that is sort of exercising your mind?
Yeah, there have been conversations about the dollar for a while now, and some countries have made effort to try and move out of the dollar. But because, again, of the architecture of the global financial system, you've had the US putting blockades and sanctions on people. And it's very ridiculous, because then it goes back to, there's a document I was reading by Vijay Prashad, and he says it's one thing to have things in law and in policy. But it's another thing to resource whatever you're saying is in your law and in your policy.
Yeah.
So what the dollar has been doing is against so many international financial laws, but they've always gotten away with it.
True.
So people will die in winter in some countries. People will die of drought. People will die of, artificial humanitarian crisis because they don't have access to the dollar, because a bully has decided the whole international system is going to run on the dollar, including the SWIFT and everything. So they can decide Kenya and Uganda is not going to change dollars from wherever they sit. This has nothing to do with them, but because they just don't want Kenya and Uganda to trade, they can decide to block it.
That's true. I mean,
so,
go ahead.
The de-dollarization conversation is also a survival question. It is something that needs to happen, so urgent.
So you are looking at this as an issue?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I want to ask one more question around this, and now we switch now to you, Irene, as a person and the kinds of things that you've been doing on the ground. And so if we're looking at de-dollarization, right, as a solution, but that's not going to happen for a number of years, right? And the conversation around financing, resourcing the kind of action that we require around the world is one where we go to COP26, we say we'll commit 150 billion. COP27 comes, there's only $1 billion that's committed or what have you. The same sort of thing keeps on happening again and again and again. And we know that we need a lot more money than even what's being committed, right? Surely, can we continue to assume that the West, especially those countries in the global north who are supposed to be signing on to these Paris agreements, etc., Marrakesh and what have you, Copenhagen, are going to pay up if they haven't? Shouldn't we be looking for a different solution to find the money to ensure that we do what we need to do?
They're not going to pay up. And
if they don't, what do we do? Now we're stuck.
But they still also hold the money. A huge chunk of the money. So what needs to happen is, even African leaders now have to really stop this thing of saying something else, putting something else in law and policy, and then the reality is something else. So we really need to come to a point of convergence in terms of those three things. That we don't just have people talking and saying, we want to be a leader in this and be a leader in that, and still sell out people with these false solutions like carbon credits and all those things.
Exactly. So like a carbon credit system that's not uniform, etc. Those kinds of solutions seem not to be working, at least at this point in time. My point here is William Ruto, representing Kenya, representing Africa, goes and says, look, you guys need to give us $200 billion this year. They say, Mr. Ruto, okay, we'll give you the money next year. They don't give you the money, right? And the wheels go round and round. How long can we wait until we look for more money from elsewhere? Like, how do we resource this? That's really what I'm asking.
No, we cannot wait for more money. First of all, we are not even able to account for the taxes that we pay. So can we first do that? Like every government in Africa account for the taxes that people pay. Secondly, governments have to be very deliberate in the kind of the so-called bilateral and multilateral things they go into.
Okay.
Because as long as we continue to allow our resources to go out and come back as finished goods and all those things that they do in between, and a lot of money is lost in the process. So at the national level, we have to have a leadership that mean what they say and act. But at the global stage, for Africa to negotiate and be able to hold these people as at ransom and say, you're going to pay this or this, for you to put ultimatums, then Africa has to unite. And people really have to, there's really no other way to do it.
That's not in doubt. That is not in doubt.
So you have to unite because these people come to the table as EU, as all those things, as BRICS, as G7, as
Kenya,
G20.
we come as Burkina.
As we go as Kenya,
as
Burkina Faso.
We're 70 years in.
We're
70 years into the founding of the OAU right now, which is the AU. We have unity in a sense, right? And again, these are things that came up in that conversation I referenced. But look, China built the headquarters of the AU, right? A huge chunk of the budget of the AU comes from the European Union. So I'm interested in what you're saying about, accounting for the taxes that have been given, because there's a lot of leakage, there's a lot of wastage, and probably we could fund our way out of this crisis. But now on manufacturing, on being able to, the drivers of that, so manufacturing, etc., all of these things, at least at this point in time, require the use in large part of fossil fuels, of highly consumptive means of being able to extract, right? So it's a really delicate balance, Irene, and I wonder whether you see and feel this dilemma on the ground, right? So on the one hand, you can see the impact that's taking place on the ground. But on the other, we kind of still need the same things that were used in the past. Or do you think that we can do this independent of them and use other cleaner sources of energy?
If
and
we
how
unite,
quickly can it happen?
Because we can then leverage on each other's resources and expertise.
Okay.
But it shouldn't be a dilemma. It is a dilemma because of the nature of economic and political system that we are in.
Yeah.
Because it is a dilemma because you haven't resolved the land question. So you're wondering, if you're going to drill oil in Turkana, where are you going to take these people? You're not interested in...
At least there was a victory that was scored, but albeit...
It shouldn't be a dilemma. And then you are able to restore places that you have mined in. It's just that, again, corporates are not interested in restoration. It's always extract, and go. So if you sort out the structure, still, it will not be a dilemma because you have huge chunks of land. You're able to demarcate and say this will be a mining area or an industrial space. This will be an agricultural space. You're able to do that. But you can only do that if you shift the structure and change the economic system. If it is as it is now, that is how it was designed to be. To create crisis after crisis and then start saying you have a dilemma. It should not be a dilemma.
Perhaps it's the logical conclusion of what capitalism is, that you find the most efficient way or the route of least resistance to being able to produce wealth using the factors of production that you have, and not so much a conspiracy, but perhaps something that people have used to their advantage.
Yeah, you create disaster and profit out of the disaster. You create a crisis and use it to make profit.
Okay, Irene, let's move to you, right? So I'm interested to learn about what really moves you when it comes to the kinds of things that you're seeing on the ground. What is it that you wake up feeling excited to go and do? Or what is it that you go to sleep weighed down by when it comes to the climate crisis?
The fact that people don't have access to very basic things like water and food. Like, why should people not have access to food, water, electricity, housing.
When you say people, do you have a particular person in mind? So I'll give you an example. When I say that children, for instance, shouldn't go without a quality education, the people that I have in my mind are my kids. Who is it that you picture whenever you think about this climate crisis and people going without water?
I picture myself, and by my family, I mean my brothers and my parents, who have worked as teachers, I think, for 30 years now. And then even as they are going to age, they still have to think about the price of food and water. And my mom is struggling at the moment to get electricity because Kenya Power sent me a very expensive invoice. So we are looking to solar, but solar has also become very expensive because of the taxes. So here you have people who have served the country for their entire life, and now it's time for them to, they're almost retiring, and they're still struggling to have very basic things.
How does that make you feel?
So, very bad. I'm like, why were you even running around the Kenya National Union of Teachers fighting for things? And that sometimes my mom is just like, can you please take care of yourself, go to school, get master's, PhD, and stop this nonsense of being an activist. Because she doesn't, even my brother is, you are the activist, but you keep telling us about rights, and as we grow up, those rights keep on being violated. At one point, my brother asked me, how universal is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? And I said, maybe you have a point, because Article 43 of the Constitution talks about water very explicitly. But maybe it should be edited to construction businesses and car washes have access to water. Not every person.
There are rights that, some rights are gained progressively, some should be universal immediately. And I agree. I think one of those that should be universal immediately, in as much as the resources might not be there, is the right to water, for instance, the right to food, etc. But I still want to stay with you for a moment, right? So you said something in there that really got me thinking about the struggle, right? That when you've chosen the struggle to talk about people's rights, especially rights that people can't perceive. You see, if I'm talking about the right to food, that's a conversation that many people can sort of get with very quickly. They think of ugali, they think of their next meal. A right to water, we've got water in front of us. They think of how expensive it is to bottle it, to transport it, etc. When you're talking about environmental rights, it sometimes feels a little bit out there for some people. But the question I want to ask is now more at a personal level. You're out here fighting for people's rights. Who's fighting for you?
I think my parents fought for me in their harakati of being in the union and stuff and other people who have gone before us.
And who's fighting for you today?
Today, I don't know.
So then what keeps you going?
What keeps me going is because we need to survive, Allan. We can't watch ourselves go extinct. Why?
I'll ask an even harder question, one that's been asked of me in my profession. Can you eat rights?
Eat what?
Can you eat your rights, the rights that you are going to fight for? Unaweza kuzikula? Huwezi kuzikula.
Chakula ndio unaweza kula.
Si ndio? You can't take the rights to the bank. You can't make money out of the rights. And yet you need money to survive. How do you do it? Because it's an important fight that you have in front of you. How are you able to survive so that you can fight?
That's a struggle that I have had for a long time. And at some point in a podcast, someone asked me, do you sometimes say, okay, this thing, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to stop. And I say, I do that so many times. I wake up and I say, these people from Kamkunji and all these places, the guy I was talking to is from Kamkunji. If they call, I'm not going to pick up their phone. I am not going to do these things anymore. But then I think about how indispensable I am. Because when public systems don't work, it means the next person in line can easily be me. So for me to survive, they really have to work. But also on a practical level, I try to do like work outside, for lack of a better term, of what I'm doing. And it is a very difficult balance to strike. Because the work I do with communities, I really don't like doing it on a payroll, because then it comes with a lot of strings attached and a lot of non-flexibility. And communities are not homogeneous. The way you're going to deal with people in Nyalenda in Kisumu is not the same way you're going to deal with people right next door in Manyata in Kisumu, same with Nairobi, same with the rural place.
Are they thankful for the work that you do?
Yeah, they are. When Clint and Nyakerario came to Babadogo,
Clint and Nyakerario, for context, people who work for
African Censored.
Clint is behind this camera over here that I'm pointing at.
Yeah,
Hi,
there's
Clint.
an old man we met, and
Yeah.
Clint, I want that picture, or is it a video? There's an old man who was there when they came to interview me.
Yeah.
And he said he's very grateful of what I do. And that felt really okay. It really felt, I don't know how to explain the feeling. And then some other time we were walking with my friend in Komongo, and then a kid came running. Then he was like, Teacher Asuwa, sasa. And I was like, okay, I don't think I've met you before. Said, nakuonanga tempo, ukikuja kutufunza vitu za mazingira and stuff. So I have had very real, intimate connections with people that I wouldn't trade anything for. And I have also seen like people change for the better. Like for instance, there are people we work with that come out of prison, come out of crime, come out of rehab, and through the initiatives that we do, they are reintegrated back into the community. So those are things that really don't have a price tag, but have a larger impact.
A larger significance.
Yeah, and a larger significance, and a very massive ripple effect that we cannot be able to quantify. So such things keep me going.
You know, this has been a running theme in this season with many of the people that we've spoken to, that the strength, the happiness, the purpose that they draw doesn't come from doing things from them for themselves, for themselves, but from the reaction and the kind of impact it has on others. So I congratulate you for that, Irene. You've done really well in that regard, and I hope that Ecological Justice continues to be able to to build on the kinds of things that you're doing today and tomorrow. And in as much as you're trying to create a factual narrative around climate justice, there have been issues of fake news, right, around climate justice. My fellow fact checker over here, Tracy, has been listening to this conversation. And Tracy, Irene talks about the coming disaster, the coming floods, the fire on the mountain, right? But that's also been used in many ways to be able to sort of like become fodder for misinformation. I wonder what you found.
Yeah, so in fact, ever since the 1 million claims we debunked during the election period, climate change has now become hot cake for people who are spreading misinformation and disinformation on Facebook and Twitter mostly. So now, the images they are using to spread this mis and disinformation are not fake, only that they are old images that they are now reusing to claim that these are recent events. Remember the reports on the famine earlier in the year and the floods in between March and May? So now, I'm going to show you guys a couple of images.
Okay. Yeah.
So, there's an image here
Yeah.
of a man,
Yeah.
extremely skinny,
Yeah.
holding on to a jerrycan. I think he was going to look for water and
So disturbing.
succumb to death, yeah. And then they claim here that it was a recent image. But then a reverse image search reveals that the image was first taken on March 24th, 2017. And it's not from the flood, not the floods, the famine earlier this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also this one. This one is also, this is now floods.
Yeah.
Now the caption is that this is from the northern part of Kenya. But a reverse image search reveals that this image was first published by Kenya Traffic, that's a popular Twitter page, on April 18th, 2018. And it was the impact of the floods that happened then on the Garissa-Mandera road. And finally, Wish FM published a tweet here claiming that a 12-year-old girl was swept away as hundreds were displaced by floods. This is also another old image. A Google reverse image reveals that this image was first published on April 1st, 2016. Yeah.
So people miscontextualizing real photos to be able to try and create a sense of panic, right? And that's like a common tool out of the toolbox of people who want to misinform, and specifically with something like this that is a serious issue that we should all be aware of, but perhaps not acting out of fear, because when you act out of fear, you react badly, right? So I'm hoping that these kinds of things we're able to flag, and ecological justice can be part of that solution as well, right?
Sure.
Yeah, Tracy, azandi sana.
Karibu.
Thank you. All right. Now, Irene, we've got lots to discuss. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to be able to do so. As you know, limited resources everywhere, including time. Yeah, but it's been a real pleasure speaking to you, Irene, and we really respect the work that you do. Here at Africa Uncensored, of course, the team and the kind of work that we do kind of aligns in terms of the values that you have. And we are proud of the kind of things that you do. And there's a tradition that we have on the big picture, right? Just to say thank you. Mr. Lewis over here
I knew. Clint was like,
has been looking at you, yeah, and has drawn something. This is nice. Hadi amepata kamwanya. Hapo sawa. Yeah? Here you go. All right?
Thank you.
What do you think? Ni wewe ama si wewe? Ameanalyze.
I have this chubby.
Sindio? Ukismile.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah? So we want to say thank you very much for being on a big picture. We really appreciate the time that you've given us, as well as the efforts that you're making through ecological justice, right? And come again, kuja tena na tena, right? And come and tell us about these systems that we need to change. Sindio, right? Thank you very much, Irene. Right? So that's been another edition of The Big Picture. Thanks a lot for watching. Please follow the work that we're doing. Please follow Irene's work. Irene, where can we find your work?
My name is Irene Asuwa on every platform. Ecological Justice is also Ecological Justice on every platform.
On every platform. All right. So follow Irene's work on Ecological Justice and Irene Asuwa on every platform. Follow Africa Uncensored as well. AF Uncensored on Twitter. Africa Uncensored everywhere else. And join our Patreon. Become a patron, and throw some money, some dollars there. For us to be able to continue to do the work that we're doing, meet people like Irene, and build the agenda of sustainable, credible, investigative, and in-depth work, as only we can do. My name is Allan. Namu. Thanks a lot for watching The Big Picture. We'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, guys.